Hi everyone, I hope that you're doing great. My name is Thierry Gibraltar, and about 3 weeks ago I bought the 33mm f1.4 and I haven't stopped using it since. Actually, I already shared with you my first impression of the lens in the video right here, but today I just want to make a comparison between the 35mm f1.4 and the new 33mm f1.4. So let's just get started. So first, the new 33mm f1.4 weighed approximately 360 grams for a length of 73.5mm and a diameter of 67mm. On the other end, we have the 35mm f1.4. The 35mm f1.4 weighed about 180 grams for a length of 55mm and a diameter of 65mm. So when you put both lenses together, they don't look that different, right? You can see that the 33mm f1.4 is a bit bigger than the 35mm f1.4. But when you take them in your hands, definitely the 33mm f1.4 is way heavier. In fact, is almost twice as heavy. So if you're looking for something compact, something that you can bring everywhere, I would say that the 35mm f1.4 is made for you. It's way lighter, a bit more compact, and you will almost not feel it at all in your everyday carry bag. However, I do not mean that the 33mm f1.4 is a bulky lens by any mean. In fact, if you look at how both lenses look on my X-T4, well, the 33mm f1.4 look fine, and I do not have any problem carrying it around all day long. So for the size and weight, I would say that the 35mm f1.4 wins, but the 33mm f1.4 is not a bulky lens by any mean. Alright, so now let's talk about build quality. Well, the 33mm f1.4 and the 35mm f1.4 both are greatly built lenses. They have a metallic build, but the 33mm f1.4 present an aperture ring that it feels a bit more safe, a bit safer, that won't move around easily, and also have this little feature that you can see right here, which is a lock on the aperture ring. So basically you cannot engage the automatic position, which is right here. You cannot engage the automatic position without pushing the lock, and disengage it also. So this is a plus when it comes to the 33mm f1.4, but it's not a huge deal. When it comes to the zoom ring, I would say that again the 33mm f1.4 feels smoother. The zoom ring on the 35mm f1.4 seems a bit clunkier, but maybe that's due to the fact that the 35 is older and that I've used it more. But I remember that it was around the same when I bought it. Now, one huge deal of the 33mm f1.4 compared to the 35mm f1.4 is the weather resistance. You can use this lens in the rain, in the snow, or in dusty environment without being worried of it, catching some dust or some water inside your body or inside the lens. So this is a huge plus if, like me, you like shooting in this kind of environment. One additional point that I would like to mention is that the 35mm f1.4 is so compact that when you put it on your body, or when you put it out of your body, right, and you have to do that little rotation mechanism, it sometimes is hard to do so because you usually touch a bit the aperture ring and turn it when you want to remove it. So I would say that for this also, the 33mm f1.4 feels better to me. So overall in this category, I would definitely give it to the 33mm f1.4. Alright, so now let's talk about image quality. So both lenses present great image quality, but I would say that the 33mm f1.4 has less chromatic aberration, has a better contrast, and is definitely sharper, especially on the corners, at f1.4 compared to the 35mm f1.4. But when you increase your f number to 2.8, I would say that the image quality of both lenses is really comparable. One additional point that I would like to make about image quality though is that the 33mm f1.4 supports up to 40 megapixel sensors, which is not the case with the 35mm f1.4. And if you have checked my video about the new stack sensor that Fujifilm announced, that is rumored to be at 40 megapixel, I would say that the 33mm f1.4 is a better investment for the future technologies that Fujifilm is to bring to us. So overall, for image quality, both are great lenses, don't get me wrong, but the 33mm f1.4 is a tad superior. If you enjoyed the video so far and if it's helpful for you, make sure to leave a like. And let me know in the comment if you plan on getting this lens or if you already own one of them. Alright, so now let's talk about a very important point, and I think one of the points that differentiate the most with weather resistance both of those lenses: autofocus. So I shoot street photography, travel photography, some food also, and some portraits, right? So if you're only shooting portrait in controlled environment, the 35mm f1.4 works great. When you go out in the streets, you start having some limitation from time to time depending on the environment. If it's a really dynamic environment like in the streets of Tokyo, you start missing quite a lot of shots because of the autofocus and because it's constantly hunting, right? When I switched to the 33mm f1.4, that was my main concern. Will I forget about the autofocus issues that the 35mm f1.4 had? Well, what I can say is that in the past 3 weeks that I've been shooting with the 35mm f1.4, I don't think that I've missed many shots because of its autofocus, right? The autofocus doesn't hunt, find the subject, and sticks to it, which is basically what you want. It makes you forget about any issue or any thought that you have about the autofocus. And whenever you snap a picture, usually it's on point. So this is definitely a point for the 33mm f1.4. An additional point that I have for the autofocus is video. The 33mm f1.4 is really pleasing to use for video because you don't have any problem of focus, it doesn't hunt, and it's silent compared to the 35mm f1.4. The 35mm f1.4, if you need to shoot people and use the sound in camera or with a mic that is close to the camera, you might have some issues with the sound because you will hear the autofocus motor going back and forth to find focus. You don't have this issue anymore with the linear motors that are present in the 33mm f1.4, and that is why I think it's better suited for video. So overall, for the autofocus, it largely goes to the 33mm f1.4. Alright, so when it comes to price, there is a difference of about $200 between the 33mm f1.4 and the 35mm f1.4. The 33mm f1.4 is priced at $800, while the 35mm f1.4 is priced at about $600. But you will definitely find the 35mm f1.4 at cheaper than $600. In fact, I believe that a lot of people will try to sell their 35mm f1.4 to get the new 33mm f1.4, so it might be a good idea if you don't need the extra features of the 33mm f1.4 to get the 35. I assume $450 or $500. So you're not talking about a difference of $200 anymore, but you're talking about a difference of $300 to $350. So it depends on you. It depends on whether or not you have the money to spend on the 33, or if you are on a budget, or if the features that I mentioned before are not the priority for you. It might be a good idea to get the 35mm f1.4, which is, well, let's face it, way cheaper than the 33. Okay, so now it's time for the verdict between those two lenses. So on one hand you have a cheaper, not cheap, but cheaper, compact 35mm f1.4 that has great image quality and is more made for static kind of subject. On the other end you have a bit bulkier $800 lens that has great autofocus and weather resistance. So it really depends on what are your needs. If you shoot in controlled environments and you don't need the weather resistance, and you're not really focusing on video, I would say go with the 35mm f1.4. It's a great lens and I don't think that you will regret it, because after so many years it's still praised by Fuji users, and it has, I think it got old pretty well, you know, it's well, almost 10 years old now, and it's still a great lens. A lot of people still love it, and well, if you pick it up you will understand why. But if you're focused on video, or if you're evolving in a really dynamic environment and you need that autofocus and that weather resistance because you want to shoot in snow or in rain or dust, well, the 33mm f1.4 is basically the option that you should go for. And it is actually the option that I will go for also. Because in the street of Tokyo, whether it's raining like today, you know, whether there are a lot of people and I want to focus on a particular subject, I know that the autofocus won't let me down. And this is exactly what I was looking for a replacement of the 35mm f1.4. So I'm going for the 33mm f1.4, but remember, the 35 is still a great lens. Alright, so if you're thinking about buying this one of those lenses, make sure to check the links in the description. They are affiliate links. They don't cost you anything, but they can help you support the channel. So I will be really grateful for that. And that's it for today. I hope that you enjoyed the video. And if you enjoyed the video, consider to leave a like, to subscribe to the channel. I will have more content around the 33mm f1.4 coming soon. I want to plan a portrait session actually. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.